Hey everybody, how's everybody doing? Come on in, come on in, come on in, come on in. I've had some technical difficulties. Getting a bunch of you guys. I know that I said that I would be on Zoom, but there was some issues with Zoom. So come on in here, everybody, come on in. I want to talk to you today about observe the mask. Bear with me here. I'm learning this new piece of technology. I am going to go ahead and get started. I will be on a regular basis. Hey there. Come on in, come on in. I know this was late notice. Some of you guys that are going to be coming in a little bit late, you'll be able to watch this. I will host it on my YouTube channel, and I will host it again on Instagram. So come on in. When you come on in, make sure that you hit the like button. Do share this with your people, with your groups. It's funny how it's been a while since I've been on, and things have changed on Facebook. And for me to stream it with everything else was a little challenging. Yeah, come on in. Let me just get everything set up here. All right. Let's go with this. Okay. All right. Come on in. How's everybody doing? All right. I'm going to take this off. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you guys today about observe the mask. And this is a book that I wrote a while back, and it talks about the identity and who we are as an ego. And it's determined. It's actually in the book. The ego is being referred to as the mask. And this book was relevant then and is just as relevant now. Come on in, come on in. You guys like, share, and subscribe to the channel. So I'm going to go ahead and get started as everybody's coming in. I got people responding. So again, just bear with me on, you know, dealing with all these pieces of technology. So let's kind of just start off a little bit with who we are or who we think we are as ego. And who ego is, you know, in its basic form, who we think we are. Ego comes in all shapes and sizes. You know, in fact, everyone has an ego. It's the details that are defined within that make the difference. And the ego, when you think about ego, I want you to think about it as, you know, it's the sense of who we think we are, the sense of self, an idea about who people say we are. Ego is, the conscious mind, the part of the identity that we consider ourself. We identify with this thing called this is who I am. And ego gets created in the early stages of our life. Some of the contributors or some of the contributors of who we think we are our parents, our family, groups, society, learned culture, education, media, etc. The problem is with the ego or the mask is we have become so attached to who we think we are and then try to convince others that this is who we are as well, that we essentially begin to create a prison for ourselves. And this prison, this internal or mental prison that I like to call the mask, is how we define ourselves. So that's why it's important that when you look at the mask and you can see with the mask, it has a definition. We have been defined again by social groups, by our family, by society, by culture, by our education, by our media, and that makes up who we think we are. Let's say, for example, the person who believes themselves to be a hard worker or an ambitious type may become depressed when they suddenly lose their job or they experience failure because these situations threaten who they thought they were. Thank you. Come on in here. The fabric of the mask is based in thought, idea, concepts, and belief systems. A belief in its simplest form is a thought that you just keep thinking. And it creates an experience to validate the thought. And now that thought gets transformed into a belief pattern. And you believe that the thought that you live through your life inside of this belief, it becomes truth, not based on anything real. So when you think about ego or the mask, figuratively or literally, depends on our belief system to have its survival. So what's happening? What happens when we stop believing that who we think we are is who we are? We can start to become more in tune with our true self, which is the part of us that is what I have defined as the observer or the observer of ego. Not the ego self. We begin to expand in the conscious realization of truth about who we really are, which is the creator constantly creating an experience, the observer of the observation. We realize that the state of freedom, when you begin to see that you are not who you think you are, or you are not defined by what you've created and identified as who you are or who you think you are, then you can have access to or the realization that a state of freedom, liberty, justice, and power to create lies within. So that brings me to the whole purpose of me wanting to share this message with you about observing the mask, because the book was written for the individual to observe its own creation, to empower you to begin to create something from the unknown versus creating something from the known. So, but if we look at observe the mask from a broader perspective, pushing the boundaries of the mask by expanding the observation beyond self-identity into observing the mask as it relates to the symbolism being used right now during this global pandemic called COVID-19. So let's observe the mask from that broader perspective. So go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also, let's go ahead and start with let's observe the mask as the mask mandate. This new conversation that's going on in our society, in our groups, in our community, in our culture, in our state, in our nation. What is this conversation called the mask mandate? Why is it occurring right now? So, mask mandate, is it a necessary protection or is it a political symbol? The observer versus the observation. What is the mask mandate? Observe the mask from a health perspective. The guidelines from the CDC, our public health officials say to wear the mask as a necessary protection to stop from spreading the virus from one host to possibly another, or from one person to another. That's what the mask mandate is about, based on from a health perspective. But why is the mask mandate happening right now? These guidelines apply to everyone, encouraging us all to wear this cloth face covering to reduce the spread of the virus. Here is the whole purpose for observing the mask at this stage of the phase of this pandemic COVID-19 crisis is number one, as you begin to observe the creation and what's unfolding in our culture, in our state, in our society, in our group, in our world, there's an awareness that happens. The awareness as you begin to observe the mask mandate or not, the term is used with wearing the mask for protection or safety. Are the guidelines just that? Or is it really constructing or building a platform for control? Observe the mask. Controlling what you think, how you think, controlling your choices. That is the question. That is the why for the observer observing the mask mandate. Why are some adhering to the guidelines and some are not? Is this a conscious choice or an unconscious, implicit behavior? Observe the mask. Necessary protection or a symbol now being used to push a political agenda. Again, like, share, and subscribe this message. You want to make sure not only that you hear this message, that your group and the societies and your community get exposed to this message. Number two, let's observe the mask as a symbol being used to push a political agenda. Mask as an object to administer control of a narrative. What is this narrative? What kind of control am I referring to? As we are moving into right now this recovery phase or the reset of a process, observe the mask, the symbol of control. You want to think about the political system or a political agenda. When I think about that, I think about the political system defines processes or makes official government decisions. Each political system is embedded in a society and its own political culture. And then that culture begins to shape the society through public policy. There are policies being made while we're focusing on wearing the mask, whether it is absolutely necessary for protection. Don't get me mistaken. I don't want my delivery to be mistaken in that I don't think that masks should be worn to protect us from a virus. However, because of how things are being processed right now and the information that's coming out, I want us to have the opportunity to observe that process. And that process right now is based on this flu called COVID-19. And a flu is not a killer. A flu is a virus that wants to live in a host, and inherent within its process is that it wants to mutate, not necessarily kill someone. So we are protecting from getting the flu, but is it related to these deaths? And I definitely know that we have had deaths that have been identified as deaths being caused by COVID-19. So when I talk about the political agenda, these systems are being rolled out inside of the conversation of COVID-19. So let's go and let's look at number one. We talked about mask mandate. Then we talked a little bit about observing the mask as a symbol for political agenda. And I broke down a little bit about the political system and how political agendas get created through public policy. So, and we're beginning to see public policy mandating different behaviors in society. So let's go to the other point that I want to bring up, which is the programs controlling processes. Observe the mask. The program called mask mandate or mask as guidelines. Ask yourself, are you being controlled by COVID-19 pandemic? Are you wearing a mask or not? When we all were sheltering in place, and I'm still sheltering in place relatively, the only time that I'm going out is when I have to, adhere to essentials. But sheltering in place, restricting our outings, social distancing, that's an oxymoron. How can you be social and distance, right? Isolation and quarantining. Those who are exposed and or have been exposed are asked now as a guideline to isolate and quarantine. But the purpose for observing how we and our civil liberties and civil rights are beginning to be governed through the mask of COVID-19 is worth observing what's really happening here. The program is equivalent. This programming that they are doing, when we sheltered in place, it shifted how we thought, how we felt, when we can go, how we can go, how we spent our money, where we spent our money, because everything was relatively closed. So I constitute this programming as the sleeping pill. And the ingredients of the sleeping pill, if you guys have any comments, feel free to put them in. I'm almost done here. Is the ingredients of the sleeping pill is fear first. You have to inject fear to begin to control behavior and thoughts and feelings. And then there's another program or process that's being used, clothed inside of this pandemic. Again, it's about observing the mask, division and distraction and confusion. Creating division as a strategy to create cultural distraction. Observe the culture, the mask. In the culture right now, Leadership is using desperate tactics to distract from COVID-19 by sowing and creating cultural divisions. For the last, I would say, month or 2 months, we've been dealing with civil demonstrators, protesters, or I like to call them demonstrators, demonstrating that what's going on in the culture, in our community, in our society is a fringe on our civil liberties. So division used as a distraction, if you are one that is attached to your identity, your ego, the mask, you continue to react and respond to the discourse or the illusion of this perpetration called division. For example, if you find yourself being drawn to or pulled towards the illusion of social conflict, just know that you are being defined by the mask. Know that you are being programmed by the mask. Reprogramming or reinforcing the program via inaccurate reporting of racial disparities is a distraction. You see this being played out with segments of the United States population choosing not to wear the mask, while other segments are being guided to wear the mask to protect others or to protect yourself. Is it a necessary protection or a political agenda reinforcing the story or the narrative of the illusion of white supremacy? There are some facts that I can share, but let's see my time frame here. I'm about 22 minutes. So on the next time I come on, I will talk about some of the clinical researches. Thank you guys for being on. Some of the clinical researches around this narrative being created of people of color being disproportionately exposed or carriers of the virus, more susceptible to get the virus. Do you know that it's been stated that there's a public policy to reduce the world population by 2 to 3 billion people? That makes me think that I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'll say it again, that I believe that we're in an unspoken civil war and a biochemical war. When you think about civil war, the civil war that took place back in 1861 through 1865, between the South and the Northern states. Basically, that war was over economic interests, cultural values, the same thing that we're experiencing right now, but nobody's calling it a war. The power of the federal government to control the states. And most importantly, the Civil War back in that time was about slavery in American society, fighting for civil rights and civil liberties. That is current today. So I want to suggest or have you consider that if you're in a war, it's important to understand the opposition. Examples of civil rights include, because civil rights differ from civil rights, civil liberties. So when you think about civil rights, are our rights to vote being compromised right now? Observe the mask. The right to a fair trial, the right to government services, the right to public education. I wonder why there's a push to push kids back into the public education during the crisis of COVID-19, and the numbers are still rising. Observe the mask and the right to use public facilities. Civil rights are not in the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights protects our civil liberties against governmental powers. Observe the mask. Civil rights and civil liberties are being compromised today. Are we consciously aware, woke to, making conscious choices for our economic interest, our cultural values on a local level, a state level, and a national level? I remind you, mask mandate, necessary protection, or a political symbol. Mask as a symbol being used to push a political agenda. Mask as an object to administer control of a narrative. The current language being used right now, we're in this recovery phase. Recovery. You know, is the prefix of the word to go back. Recover, go back and cover. What are we covering? What are we covering up? Reopening phase. So let's take a quick look. And I'm almost done here. I wish I would have gotten myself a glass of water. But let's take a look at the stages that we've gone through over the last April, May, June, July, so the last 4 months. In March, we knew that COVID-19, or that we were in a pandemic, and what had happened in Europe and China or Asian countries had now come on to the United States of America. And this stage, I'm going to break it down in 4 stages. Awareness and acceptance of COVID-19 was stage 1. The awareness and acceptance is here and spreading, and people are dying. Injection of fear began. The nation shut down, getting prepared for the disruption. And the guidelines were to shelter in place. Stage number 2 was we began to experience an operational disruption. With sheltering in place, we were then afraid to go out. There were people that hoarded toilet paper and meats, and the grocery stores and the major chains that were distributors to us were not being able to keep up with the supply or the demand, up with the demand or the supply for the demand. This is when the reprogramming was being implemented. This is when they were beginning to define who we are as a culture, housed in this condition called the pandemic, COVID-19. The conversation about the importance of wearing the mask for safety and protection was being initiated into the culture, into the cities, into the state, into regions, into the nation. This was the blue pill of control. This was the beginning of the sleeping pill for some. Because in this phase, COVID tests are available to society, and testing began. Now, did we have a reliable test? No, but the testing was there. The program to condition human thoughts, ideas and feelings, etc., has retrained those not awoke, those not woke, on how to live, when you can go, what you should think, and how you should feel. This is another thing that happens inside of operational disruption. It's called predictive programming. They tell you what is about to happen before it happens. So we, humanity, will feel comfortable with the program. Think back for all of us that are in technology and using our phones and love all of these apps, but you have to know what's going on behind the scenes with all of these apps. You must observe the mask. Think back to Snapchat when they were suggestively programming you to a comfort level to wear the mask. And you were actually happy to capture pictures of like and sharing you with this comforting depiction of wearing the mask. And now that predictive programming is your reality. Phase number 3, peak infection and crisis management. I say we're there right now because we see the reports of peak infections. We saw the reports of peak infections maybe about 6 weeks ago with the city of New York. Reports of the virus touching all people now, not a respecter of race, social economic status, size, geographical location. In this time of peak status, some things happen to generate, again, distraction and division. And our civil rights and civil liberties and demonstrations were happening all over the nation. In this phase, we've had a hint of food shortages. You've also have the experience of a hint. Please observe the mask of no change in large distribution centers, like where you purchase your food, your gas, and Target or Walmart. These large distribution centers are no longer giving out change. Remember the predictive programming. They show you what's about to come. And that is why it is so important for you not only to know who you are as beyond your ego and beyond who you have been defined as by those factors that I talked about earlier, your family, your parents, your society, your culture, your religion, your education, the media. Those have defined who you think you are, but you are greater than who you think you are. And you have to understand, as we expand out into observing the mask from a cultural perspective, from a, let's say, a community perspective, a society perspective, a state perspective, a region perspective, or a national perspective, heck, a global perspective. The predictive programming is being shown. So you have to observe how they want to define us as a humanity through the confines of this conversation called the mask. Observe the mask. Again, I want you guys to like, share. I see your comments out there. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Number 4, stage 4 of this epidemic, pandemic, COVID-19 crisis is the de-escalation of crisis condition. You know, when we started off in March, everybody was having live talk shows. I mean, you couldn't watch TV, which is, you couldn't watch television without somebody giving you a status update. But now, as you see, the conversation is shifting. We're still hearing a little bit. You know, there's a de-escalation around the conversation and the seriousness of the virus, yet the conversation about the mask is more prominent right now. Observe the mask. This de-escalation of crisis condition. This is the recovery phase. Recover. What are you covering up? while somebody's focused or distracted on division or disparities. What is happening? And the reopening phase. The mask mandate is going to be implemented. There will be no choice in the matter. Let me also say that with this predictive programming, they're just getting a comfort level around wearing the mask because soon the vaccine will be available. Woo. And you must know about the vaccine and the clinical trials that are being done with the vaccine. There will come a time when the vaccine will be mandatory for you to roam or to move around in your civil liberties or your civil rights to move from place to place. You won't have the choice. You will have to have the vaccination. You will have local enforcement occurring, fines, which is the public policies that I was talking about. The public policy fines will be administered if you're walking in the street without a mask on. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's at least been 40 tickets in the state of Florida for people not wearing a mask. Again, I ask you, is the mask necessary for protection, or is it a political agenda being implemented in the confines of the mask? In this phase of de-escalation or crisis condition, you will see the platform which is being used, will be used in 2021, called contact tracing. That is happening through the apps that you have downloaded. They're getting all of your data. Now they're getting all of your health data. I have to say this too. And those that want to argue with me or they have an opposing thought, I know. Oh my gosh, that's great. Perfect. I will post that link out there, pointing to the policy. I'll get that link out there and make sure that I post it. So contact tracing is a framework that is also going to be there to control the population. School systems are highly encouraged to reopen during this de-escalation phase, while numbers are constantly rising. Based on economics and fear tactics, observe the mask. If young people are immune from the virus, quote unquote, this is what was said, then we shouldn't hear in the future a mandate for COVID-19 vaccine for the young, correct? Division in the political system on the terms of the second stimulus package is a part of this de-escalation in this crisis. So the last stage, which we are not in, but this is the predictive programming of the new normal, stage 5, new world order, the evolution of humanity, contact tracing, observe the mask, necessary protection, or political system with an agenda. Some will wake up during this time and some will not. There will be a lot of people exiting the planet before 2021, and you must ask why. I'm just going to say that the energy on the planet during the evolution of humanity will require a certain level of vibrational frequency. So there will have to be, and I'm just going to put this out there real quickly, you will have to change what you put into your body. That's a part of observing the mask. Because if you continue to eat certain foods, it will lower the vibrational frequency. And with a lower vibrational frequency, those of you that were with me at the beginning of April, we talked about how to raise your vibrational frequency and some of the foods that you need to eat such that your body can withstand this higher vibration that's coming on the planet. So in this fifth phase, the new normal, the new world order, freedom, justice, and equality and truth are not objects to acquire. It's something that happens within. This is the observation to embrace as we begin to create a new world order. Those of us who are woke, we need a people, we need a society, we need a culture of humanity that understands old traditions, old ways of thinking, behaving, and acting, old models that no longer support who we are, but rather want to control the old narrative and induce it into a framework called recovery or reopening. This is the new normal they want you to walk into. Observe the mask. I'm going to finish with this statement. Observe the mask, necessary protection or a political symbol. I feel like we're living in a time of constant narratives to separate, create division, a sort of bipolarization of the identity, group, community, society, state, nation, region, world. Just look at the narratives around the disparities, those who are more susceptible to quote unquote the Rona, and those who are not. This narrative is pushed via media to the masses and allegedly backed up with data to maintain, reinforce the story, allegory, or narrative of white supremacy. Observe the mask or not. Wear the mask or not. It's a symbol being used to reinforce a narrative into a new era. As we are moving into different phases of opening up our consciousness to who we really are, will we ever really heal? That will be determined by each and every one of you by learning how to observe the mask. If you haven't gotten your copy already, I strongly encourage you to get your copy. You can go to my site. It is available on aprilmoales.com. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. I will be on every week. Everything that's going forward from this message on is going to be played out in all particular dramas. On particular issues and healthcare issues, I look to and I listen to, I observe, and I confer with the experts. But when it comes to creating matters like freedom, liberty, justice, and truth, I would say what individuals, groups, movements in society, community, our culture, our nation, our world, is that the mask is no longer working and can no longer accommodate the evolution of humanity in the United States and around the world. And you cannot put a mask on that. So thank you. Any questions? I will definitely put that post out there. I will be on again probably in another 7 days or so. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I want you guys to know that this is available on my site as well. Observe the mask. Very important. One is that you know who you are beyond what. This is a little crooked here, so we'll just do it like that. So just know. Have a good day. Just waiting to see if anybody has any questions before I log off.